RNG are MSI champions, and they cannot contain their excitement. TSM updates as well this episode. That can mean a couple of different things. More specifically, the Reggie investigation that people are memeing heavily about, and also some Peter Zhang news. We'll get into that as well. And then, of course, LCS summer rosters are pretty much finalized, and so we will get into that. Episode 87, Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT250. Jinter, let's just start with the celebration or lack thereof from RNG. What did you think after they won the 5 games, or game 5 rather?
I was watching the games live. Like I started watching the games on my computer, and then as I got more tired, I slowly transitioned to my phone, like in my bed. And literally as like game 5 was like pretty much over, like RNG was destroying the Nexus, I turned it off. And then only like 10 minutes ago did I actually see RNG's reaction to winning the tournament, and it literally looked like they lost the series. Like Gala got up or Ming got up and high-fived Gala, and Xiaohu smiled for like half a second, but Bin and Wei looked like they just lost. And then they panned over to T1 like 10 seconds later, and like Owner's smiling and Zeus is smiling and they're laughing with the coach. Like you would have thought it was the opposite result.
It was really, really weird. I was going to bring it up later in the episode, but because you had just brought it up 10 minutes ago before we went live, I was like, yeah, we got to talk about this pretty much instantly. Also, the other weird thing, too, is like T1 is on stage with confetti all over the place.
Yeah. That was so funny.
Oh, man. And it just goes to show that, like, okay, look, I'm not saying they should have been there in person. I think they literally did whatever the best they could to make the event what it is. But it just goes to show you some things you just can't fake or you just can't make up for. And having them not there in person really did take away from the final, the very final, I guess we'll say 10 minutes of the tournament. Otherwise, though, there was a lot of worry about ping coming into the tournament and whatnot, but the tournament went pretty well after of course, they had a really big hiccup to start off. But after they kind of figured out the ping issue, the tournament went pretty smooth, I would say.
Yeah, there didn't seem to really be any complaints, and I think once we reached the Rumble stage, the level of competition really improved. I think we saw a lot of great things from a lot of teams in the early parts of that Rumble stage, and even in the back half, because in the early parts we saw G2 and RNG, succeeding and playing really, really well, and then in the back half we saw teams like EG and PSG Talon picking up wins off of these major region teams and looking quite good. And going into the Rumble stage, I think everyone was into the semifinals, everyone was expecting some really exciting matchups. Unfortunately, semifinals were not that exciting, but the finals, nevertheless, was still a really good series.
I will say, though, so let's start off with the EG RNG one. I will actually say that it looked like it was going to be really bad after game 1. Did you end up watching game 2 and 3? I remember we were watching it together, and you're like, okay, I'm going to bed.
No, I literally went to bed after the first game, so I was like, this series is not going to be close. I was kind of expecting...
And you didn't watch the rest?
Well, I watched it afterwards, obviously, but not live at the time.
Because the games did get good, game 2 and 3. Like, mind you, I think... Okay, so the games were a little bit closer, but that doesn't necessarily mean EG was playing much better. I mean, they were playing better, don't get me wrong. But, like, I think it was... I don't remember if it was game 2 or 3, but there was one game where RNG just kept throwing and giving life to EG, which, don't get me wrong, was exciting. Like, the game was definitely exciting to watch. But I couldn't sit there and in good faith be like, yeah, EG is getting their self back into these games.
Yeah, that was game 3. Like, I'm looking at the gold graph right here, and it's just, like, up, down, up, down, up, down from, like, 19 to the end of the game.
Yeah. But, okay, and obviously the very lopsided one was game 1. Game 1 was an absolute stomp. You got, pretty much every lane, not pretty much every lane lost, right? You have RNG all over the place. You got Jojo Pyun just getting out-roamed hard, which you're against a Galio. That's a big problem if you're getting out-roamed by the Galio, because Galio dives very, very easily. Impact was already losing his lane like from the start because they had Predator Galio run him down level 1, and he had no flash. I think he had no flash. They killed him, and I think he also had no flash, I think was the combination there. So it was like literally from the very first minute of the game when they invade and kill Impact and take away his flash, RNG had just completely taken over the game, and there was nothing that Inspired can do, because that lane's losing, mid's getting out-roamed, bot lane is losing like they have every single game, or every single lane pretty much throughout the whole tournament, or just about. So there's not really much that the jungler could do, and the other lanes are losing, and that was pretty much game 1.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching the draft, and even like before the game going into it, I was like, RNG literally has all their comfort champions. Guy who won Galio been on Gwen. Dude, Gwen is just like so disgusting. The champion is so good, and I think people really didn't realize how strong the champion was because it's not like Gwen was getting like massively buffed over the course of Spring Split. It was just that the rest of the competition in the top lane was just slowly getting kind of like knocked down, where we saw all the major Hullbreaker users, like the Gnar, like the Graves, even the Scion to a certain extent, like with that item now not as relevant anymore. We saw a lot of those other champions fall out of priority. We then even saw, champions like Ornn sort of pick up, but once people realized Ornn was back in the meta, hey, guess what? Gwen's a really good tank buster. So I don't remember if it was in this game even, but pretty much from the entire knockout stage, you just saw RNG picking Gwen, like blue side first pick almost every single time. And then when you follow the draft up with like one of Xiaohu's best champions, one of Wei's best champions, and the strongest Kai'Sa lane you can pretty much have, which is Gala's best champion, I found it pretty difficult to find any possibility that EG was going to win this game. And unfortunately, I was like, it was a shit stomp and I turned it off. But going back and watching games 2 and 3, definitely it kind of gave me like more hopes for EG, at least in the future, should they ever be back at another international tournament or even be in those big spots, because we can kind of see NA teams specifically really fold under the pressure and not be willing to brawl with these LPL or LCK teams in these best of fives. Like a few ones that really stick out in my mind was what was it? It was C9's best of five against Gen G, where this is at Worlds 2021, where they brought out this like crazy game 1 draft. They're playing Diana Yasuo, and then in games 2 and 3 they just like went into their shell and pretty much didn't do anything, got rolled over and died. Where I was pretty happy to see EG like just not roll over and die and actually like kind of make it at least interesting for us.
Yeah, no, they definitely got better as the series went on, and I guess that honestly is just true when it comes to the tournament in general. They got better as the tournament went on as well. They started to look a lot better, and I don't think, I think there are very, very few, and I know we've said this before, but I'll say again, there's very, very few North American fans that are disappointed with how EG played during this tournament. They're simply outclassed when you're going up against RNG, and you can't really expect them to win. But like you said, they did put up a good fight, and specifically where I thought I saw improvement in this series. So I actually thought JoJo just got hard outplayed in game 1, whereas like even when he did get outroamed by the Galio, he like was late TPing top lane to like help his top lane or whatnot. So I thought his game 1 was pretty bad. But after that, he kind of picked it up, and like his Ari was like pretty much the main pick tool, if you will. Like he's landing a lot of different charms in fights or to start fights, where that's where they're getting back in these games. So a lot of credit does need to go over to JoJo for how he got better as the series went on. I thought his Ari was really, really good.
Yeah, I think the one pretty glaring place where EG was definitely struggling was the top lane. And I know my sort of notion has always been that you don't need to worry about impact, but Bin's kind of a crackhead, so
Yeah, it's funny that you said, because I was about to bring that up as well. Last week we both, and not even just last week, we've said in the past many times, like, Impact's like he's a veteran, he's usually pretty solid, and he's not really playing to win lane a lot of times. He's playing in a losing matchup, and he's just trying to survive. That didn't happen in this series. Bin did absolutely stomp him, and Bin wasn't having the greatest tournament either. Bin really showed up this past weekend far more than he did the rest of the tournament, which was really nice to see out of him.
definitely he played really really well. I mean, he was on
Yeah.
some pretty gross champions, and I mean he got very favorable lanes, and that's credit to RNG like as a team and with their drafting, because he's getting this Gangplank into Ornn matchup, which is just heavily Gangplank favored both in the early parts of the lane, and it's a better scaling champion. And then like we were saying before, he got his hands on whenever he got his hands on the Gwen, he was pretty much styling. I don't remember
Yeah.
in like we'll talk about the T1 series obviously, but I think he played it twice in that series and once in this series, and every single game he was pretty much smurfing or like and taking over the entire game.
Yeah, and I want to be clear because I'm pretty sure this is not what you're saying, but stop me if I'm wrong. I want to be clear that we're not saying like, oh, he was on Broken Champions, easy game. Like, I always go back to this. Anyone, literally anyone, can ban or pick these champions,
Yeah.
but it's him, the one that is styling on it, right? Like,
Mhm.
so you have to give credit when someone is 1v9ing a game, and he's doing that. I don't care what pick he's on.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
hate the oh, he's just playing busted champion lol. It's like, okay, is he playing a good champion? Absolutely, but guess what? He's hard smurfing the fucking game. So yeah, and that's the other thing too, is he is picking it blind a lot of the time, and there are counters. Whether you want to play those counters or not, whether they're meta or not, is up to the team playing against them. But there are counters, and to be able to pick something blind and still style on it is an absolute I don't know feather in your cap. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Um, where else do you want to talk about? Maybe we talk about Xiaohu and how he's still a monster no matter what he plays.
Yeah, he just seems like the perfect, you know. Here's I'll restart this conversation. If Xiaohu was placed, if he was, back in this older mid lane meta of like Aurelia, Akali, Silas, back in kind of like the end of season 8, early season 9, like I don't recall what RNG was doing at that tournament. I remember they did go to, Worlds 2018 as favorites to win the tournament, and they'd obviously won MSI the year prior. But it definitely felt like that wasn't sort of Xiaohu's style, because when you see him on these types of champions like the Ari, like the Lissandra, like the Galio, you can just really see how much of a genius he is when it comes to the macro game, whether it's the level ones, whether it's the early laning phase pairing up with Wei and making roams happen in the early game, or simply just making really nice dives happen throughout the early game. Because pretty much every single game you saw Xiaohu get his hands on either the Lissandra or the Galio, there was either something going on level 1 with burning a flash, or they were using that burned level 1 flash into, some sort of proactive play in the early game. Because we saw, I mean, once again, we'll get into the T1 series, but Predator Galio, burn the ADC, either burn the ADC's flash or you kill him. And multiple times throughout this entire tournament, we just see kind of like this magic happening with him where he just seems to be like ahead of the game. Like he just knows exactly where to be, when to be. He knows every single timing, like when it's good for his team, when it's bad for his team. Like this guy's, I'm not saying he's like on the like faker showmaker level yet, but he's definitely there. He's like, he's got one foot in the door in my
Yeah, he's
books at
getting
least.
himself there. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
And I don't
And
think
then
I don't think he was at that level even when RNG was just as dominant back in 2018. Whereas now, I would say RNG isn't as dominant. Maybe they are now because they won back-to-back MSIs, but he's in there. Like he's in that conversation.
yeah, he definitely is, and that's something I want to revisit a little bit later. As for the bot lane, this was to me, I guess this is probably where I'd say there was the biggest gap, but not really surprisingly. I kind of mentioned most of the tournament, the EG bot lane was kind of struggling, and then RNG's bot lane was absolutely monster. Um, Gala just running right up 1v2ing Danny and Vulcan on like Jinx, Tom Kench. They have to back off against just one Zaya, and I'm like, oh my god, like Gala is not afraid of them at all.
Yeah.
At all. Just running them down, the two of them, and I'm like, oh my god, that is not a good sign. And then later on, right after that play happens, a team fight breaks out, and I mean RNG knew to start the team fight because they had TP advantage. EG can't TP down, and they end up just kind of getting cleaned up as Impact is stuck top lane, hitting tier 1 tower.
Yeah, another thing that RNG does really well, both in they did it in this series and in their series against T1 in the finals, was kind of just their awareness and recognition of when to be taking cross map fights, because they had Gala in the bot lane a lot. Like I know when we talk about EG back in the LCS or a team like 100 Thieves, they would often have FBI or Danny stay in the bot lane, soak up plates, and then you would actually see them contesting on the other side of the map, even though it was 4v5 situations. And they'd come out of those situations maybe not winning the fight but getting a bunch of bot plates, but then would also win the fight, get the Herald, and also get all these bot plates. And it seems like once again RNG is just doing a really good job of knowing their limits in terms of when and how they can take these fights at a numbers disadvantage while like getting a 1v0 in the bot lane where you're taking like 2 waves and 2 plates. So pretty much anytime that Rift Herald was up, you pretty much saw Gala parked in the bot lane, and for them to take the majority of these 4v5 scenarios and usually come out even or ahead is just pretty mind-boggling. Because just from our experience of watching the LCS, like when you see these teams walking up 5v4 for a Rift Herald, you're like, what the fuck are they doing? Like they have to be trolling, and normally they are, because their execution of the fight or their knowledge of like their damage and whatnot just isn't there, and they normally make some catastrophic mistake. Whereas that's not the case with RNG. Like they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how much damage and what their cooldowns are to kill this one specific person, then get out of the fight and reset it, and then take it from a 4v4 standpoint. It's just like, I don't know, it's just like pure genius or something. Maybe I'm just like sucking on RNG's dick too hard, but like they were just playing every fight so well.
No, they had a really good tournament, and on like I think it's fair to give them credit. And the other thing too is you wouldn't expect that kind of style to work against EG, who has been pretty much all spring long. They're game plan has been, hey, let's rotate over to Herald. We'll kind of sacrifice bot lane and we'll trade to get Danny some plates, right? They grab Herald and they give him some plates top lane, and that's kind of been the way that they snowball. EG snowballs their, I don't know, the leads, I guess, if you want to call it. That's how they get their advantages. And RNG just didn't really. They had no regard for the game plan of what EG
Yeah,
did. They just didn't really care.
They didn't care at all. They were just like, yeah, we're fighting you. We're gonna kill you. See you later.
Yeah. Yeah, and last player that I want to kind of shout out was Inspired, especially in Game 3. They're kind of getting hard clapped. I mentioned at the start of the segment that, like, EG was kind of being given some leads back into some of the games. The one where I will say, like, it was actually all Inspired was where he starts resetting on Viego in the middle of the team fight. Like, EG gets hard engaged on, but instead of Inspired trying to peel back, he just goes after Gala and deletes him, along with Impact and the Ornn knockup. I think that's a really clutch play out of Inspired to realize, like, we can try to retreat here, but it's not going to work. The only way we get out of this is actually fighting and taking out their carry, and he does that and ends up resetting on Viego, and they get a big fight to swing things back a little bit more in their favor. And that's a play where I think you see a lot of people just back off and try to play defense, but Inspired recognizes, like, that's your only go time, that's your way back in the game, and so he did that. And
exactly,
and that to him for that.
That's kind of what we were saying earlier and how we were crediting EG with their willingness to take these fights and still kind of, stay somewhat within the game with RNG after they'd just gotten shit on so badly in Game 1. Because after Game 1, it literally looked doomed. Like, I walked away from Game 1 like there's no possible way and there's no, like, avenues for EG to win whatsoever. But credit to them, like, they're fighting back. And, despite the RNG kind of throws in Game 3, like, you still have to capitalize on those mistakes. It's one thing to throw the game, but it's the other thing for the opposing team to take the throw and run with it.
Yeah. And there's, like I said at the start of the show, there's literally nothing you could be upset with when it comes to EG and how they played. I guess the only thing you could be upset with, not so much about
maybe if games 2 and 3 looked like Game 1, maybe that.
Sure, but outside of it, as far as gameplay is concerned, you can't really be too upset. The only thing that I saw some people upset with was how Danny was like, "I'm kind of just glad it's over." I think for the most part, like, solid majority of people understand what he meant by saying, like, "I'm just glad it's over." It's clearly just he's a little bit burnt out, and that's what he explained later on in his tweets, basically saying, "What did he say?"
Bad PR right there.
Playing 5
EG's PR person
straight
needs to be on top of that.
The thing is, I don't care, because I think it's just he's being honest. Like, look, here's the thing. If I'm a player on the team, do I want to hear that from one of my teammates? No. Like, I want to fucking win. I don't want to hear my teammate being happy that it's over. But I don't think that means Danny wasn't trying or anything like that. I think he's just saying, like, look, I'm burnt out. Like, he mentions, I'll say what he says in his second tweet, in his follow-up. He's saying, playing 5 straight months of competitive League of Legends with scrims, riot features, official matches, lock-in, regular season LCS playoffs, Houston finals, MSI, group stage, rumble stage, semis, and everyone hates you. Now, that part, that is
not
kind of
champions, Q.
That's the sad part to me, is that everyone hates you. Like,
that was a bit extreme, I thought.
The thing is, maybe it's extreme, but maybe it's not. Like, maybe he genuinely does think that, because you have to remember, man, especially from other regions, there is so much shit talk towards players. And I guess Travis was saying on Hotline League tonight, a lot of the broadcasts were getting shit for hyping up JoJo and Danny. And if they're getting shit, I imagine the players are too. From fans from not even just other regions, but even NA fans, maybe, if they're not performing the way we want them to. Like, there's a lot of pressure that's put on someone. How old is he? Like 18 or something?
18 or 19, I think.
That's a lot of pressure to have. So I do feel bad for him in those regards. And that was the only thing. That was the sad thing. The saddest takeaway as far as, like, the whole MSI tournament. It wasn't the gameplay. It was just that you have an absolute star, because that's what he is as far as North Americans are concerned. He is an absolute star. And he is loved by so many fans, yet he kind of thinks that he's hated by a lot of people. And that, I don't know, that's just kind of sad, if you ask me.
It's just unfortunate, because the majority of people who are logical thinkers, who are following Danny and appreciate Danny and like Danny, they know what he's saying. But there's always going to be the shit stirrers who just have to, like, pick apart the language that he's using and say, it's like, oh, well, you didn't want to be there, then what the fuck? Like, it's just people being stupid. And once again, like, the people who go out of their way to, like, flame people, pros, whatever, on Twitter, like, just, I don't know, go do something else. Like,
And like I said, if you're a player on that team, do you want to hear that? No. But I feel like every player on that roster knows what he's talking about because they have been through the same thing that he's been through over the last 5 months. They probably understand what he's saying. They know that he's not like, oh, well, whatever, I don't care as long as the tournament's over. I highly, highly, highly doubt that is how he thinks about it. You don't commit your life to this kind of career because that's what it is. You're committing your life to this game. You don't do that if you don't care about winning. You just don't. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I look at it, anyways. And I hope that EG, I'm sure they do have some sort of mental health staff or whatever, someone to work with him and kind of get his head in the right place. Because, I mean, these pro players need it. Let's be real. When you're grinding like 24/7, that shit could get to you. It's always possible. Next series, yeah.
Yeah.
T1 G2. So we saw EG kind of get, we'll say semi-stomped because game 1 was the huge stomp, and then obviously they came back in game 2 and 3, made it interesting. And then I guess G2 said, hold my beer.
I think yeah. No, I think so.
If you think that's a stomp, this series was, and honestly, after this series, I was like, damn, okay, T1 is back. Like, they made G2 look really, really bad, and I really thought T1 was going to win the whole thing. After how they played in this series. This was a huge stomp. Huge. Now, I didn't see what the comparisons were to, like, because you know how G2 and TL had the shortest series or whatever?
This is now the third. I remember reading it on Twitter.
Third.
So
how close was it to being the quickest? Because this was fucking quick.
No, it definitely, well, I mean, there was a 32-minute game in there, so it definitely couldn't have been that close, because TLG2 was like 25-minute games, I think, almost every time, that or less. Well, I think one was like...
Wasn't there like a 22-minute game in this one as well?
Well, the first game was 24 minutes, and the second game was 32 minutes, and the third game was 21 minutes. So...
Anyways, that's still a quick... Like, that's quick.
Yeah, you got shit on quick. Little inside joke there.
Yeah. But anyways, that's the... excuse me. So the third quickest series ever. Where should we start? I guess to just start game 1. You have Faker, who's playing Tristana mid as the counter. First of all, that's obviously a good pick into the Galio. Second, he roams down bot lane and gets a double kill, while he also started Cull as well. Like, is there any way for this guy to get more money? They ended up getting 13 plates, which is already a lot. And Faker got 8 of them, I believe. It was at least 8. I don't know. It could have been more, but he got at least 8 plates. On top of the kills that I mentioned, on top of running Cull. And then he also got tier 2 mid because Caps on the Galio was like, there's no sense in me laning against this guy. I'm going to roam, try to make a dive bot, which, to be fair, they did pull off a dive bot. But it just didn't make up for the gold deficit that you're just bleeding while losing all the minions mid and just letting Faker take 2 turrets on Tristana. It felt like Caps realized that he was in a situation where no matter what he did, it was bad. There was no good outcome.
I definitely think that, you know, like you kind of just said, like it's you got to pick your poison here, because you're basically going to get stun locked in mid lane if you just decide to sit there and do nothing, get your wave shoved in every single time. Tristana throws the E on the tower, you really can't touch her. I mean, and just Faker's being Faker. But I thought Caps making the decision to just like fuck off mid lane and just completely roam, like I thought that was the right decision. I think so too. It might not look like the right decision in hindsight because he's not really getting a lot done around the map, and Faker is literally pushing tier 2 mid at like, what was it, 11 minutes or something like that? And,
yeah, it was early.
I don't know about like what the fan or the Twitter like reactions at the time was, but you know, presumably, how do I not sound insulting? The lesser intelligent people are obviously going to be question marking because you're like, what the fuck's going on? But you gotta realize at a certain point, like Caps is literally going to get stun locked in this lane if he doesn't, you know, leave and just try to do something.
And the theory that you would have to go with is, okay, Faker's already really, really fed. The only way we're going to kill him is if we get the jump on him first and one-shot him before he can jump out or anything like that, right? So you're thinking, all right, this guy's going to one-shot us anyways. Giving him more gold in trade so that we could have a carry on our side actually be fed is probably what you want to go for. Now, that is an oversimplification, right? Because... like you're still losing, you're still putting yourself in like a huge gold deficit. So I'm making it sound a little bit more simple than it is, but I do agree with the logic nonetheless that like if you're getting hard stomped by one guy, giving that guy more gold doesn't change things that much. The goal of a team fight is still lock down that player before he could do anything, or else you're going to lose the team fight. So giving him an extra what is it, 800 gold or whatever it is, 600 gold, I guess, for getting the tier 2. You say, look, I'll at least try to get some kills for my bot lane, and maybe we have a someone who's way ahead on our side, and I think that's the logic there.
Yeah, but I mean, even before that, because I think that whole like Caps pretty much left the lane at around like 8 or 9 minutes or something like that. But even before that, you know, when we saw T1 dive top lane, get the first blood, and G2 in response ended up going bot lane, like that was supposed to clearly be the play that was in G2's favor and was gonna, you know, give them the equivalent trade on the opposite side of the map. But we kind of saw like a really messy dive out of G2 in the bot lane where it was like I think in totality it was like 4v3 in G2's favor, and T1 comes out ahead actually, getting 2 kills, both of them being on Faker's Tristana, who was the focal point of the game anyway. So that was really where the game seemed kind of over in my eyes. Not over, but you know, like that was where, you know, T1 was really going to take that early game advantage and run with it, because that's what they've been doing with all their early game advantages. Pretty much the majority of the tournament is just getting a 5k gold lead within the first 50 minutes of the game. And when you start out the game where T1's making the aggressive play, diving topside, getting the trade kill cleanly, and Broken Blade's losing most of the wave, and then you respond by diving bot lane where you mess up the dive, you only get 1 kill, T1 gets 2 in response, and they get it on the Tristana mid lane, who's the one player who you don't really want to get super out of control. It was already a tough situation from there on out, and obviously when you're playing a matchup like Tristana versus Galio, it definitely makes, you know, looking back at that first couple of minutes of the game, I think really, you know, confirms Caps making the correct decision to then leave mid and just try to affect the rest of the map post 10 minutes when it was just fucked.
Yeah. Faker had 2 items. He had Gale Force and LDR and boots, full boots, by the way, not tier 1, tier 2 boots, and a crit cloak at 15 minutes.
That is so fucked.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, that is absolutely insane. And so that was game 1. Now, game 2 was actually a lot closer. However, this is where we finally saw, or in my opinion, when we finally saw Gumayusi start to absolutely pop off and become the guy that was hyped up to be. The one Xayah team fight was pretty much insane. He flash and pulls the feathers back. That was like the game deciding team fight for me, and I was like, okay, finally, this is the Gumayusi that we've been looking for, because, I mean, he was criticizing himself. Everyone else was saying, like, this isn't the guy that we saw all spring long. So that was really nice to see. His Xayah was pretty beast.
Yeah, game 2 was definitely really exciting. The Yone top was, I thought, pretty funny just because it was into Broken Blade, who...
Yeah, he's the guy who likes it.
Yeah, he's been pretty much, at least, I mean, I haven't been following any LPL, so I don't know if anybody in the LPL is playing Yone top, but pretty much he's the only person in the West, and I hadn't seen it ever in the LCK been brought out, so for him to whip it out was pretty sick. From my, like, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the matchup, but I think that's supposed to be like a Sion winning matchup, so I was quite surprised to see Zeus do really well. Well, because, like, I mean...
He was up like 40 CS. He was up like 150 to 100 or something, 110 or something. Like that.
I mean, it was really nice. I mean, this was a very different draft from what T1 had previously been doing the majority of the tournament, where they are putting a lot of, you know, focus on the early game and not really picking these super scaling type of champions. I think people will talk about Gangplank as like, well, Gangplank's a super scaler, but like, man, that was like the old Gangplank. New Gangplank is actually like a lane bully who can do a lot in the early game and is super impactful with this big team fighting ultimate. But Yone, like, that's like a very scaling heavy champion where you need to kind of reach 1.5, 2 items. You need to be like level 13 or at least level 11 to have a big impact. And you kind of saw, this was a very close early game for the most part. You kind of saw the teams going a bit blow for blow, and then Zeus just started taking over the game, and Gumayusi started just destroying G2 in team fights, and it was just kind of over from there. So it was definitely, once this game happened and you saw T1 go with more of a scaling draft and G2 with a little more of an early game draft, I wouldn't even call their draft early game, but they had, you know, they had these very mid game spike champions and like the Sion, the Braum, the Ari, and they can't win. It's just like, well, what's the formula for G2 to win now? Because you saw them get shut on in the early game super hard in game 1, and then in game 2, like, you survive the early mid game, and then you still can't beat them. So to me, going into the last game, I was like, yeah, this shit's over.
Yeah. I wonder what the takeaways like I would really I mean I pretty much would always like to be a fly on the wall after a team loses to hear what their thoughts were, but I really wondered like what G2 thought about these games just because of how lopsided they were as well. Like it felt like Yankos was invisible and yes, I get it. Your lanes are losing. Same thing with like Inspired in like game 1 of the last series that we talked about. Like sometimes the jungle is just going to feel invisible, but it felt like Yankos was invisible pretty much the whole series. Same with Broken Blade. Like I really wonder. I would love to hear their thoughts of like, oh, if we would have done this different, we could have done X, Y, and Z or whatever. But yeah, those two players to me really felt invisible, and it just felt like they couldn't make anything happen. Broken Blade was just continuously getting shit on almost the whole series.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then game three. Game three
Is
was
there
like,
like even a lot to say about this? Because
you know what it felt like in game three? It felt like they were kind of getting toyed with because there. Even I don't even remember what the draft was. I just remember the casters being like, specifically when it came to Faker having the Akali. I remember them being like, "Oh, I think I can kill this guy. I'll just take Akali. I can one shot this guy." And it was like, yeah, I guess that could be the thought process, but shouldn't it be a little bit more complicated than that? And then Faker just did exactly that. He was just one shotting everyone, and then you got then he then
he
juked
flash juked him.
Caps.
Oh my god, so
Like it
dirty.
really. It
So
really
dirty.
it really did feel like T1 was just toying with them, right? Like,
But even at that point, like the game was still within reach. But then pretty much after that, and Faker just like walked bot lane and killed Flackid solo, and then it kind of from that point on, it was just like this is like over. And then
with
the game just snowballed out of control. You kind of just like this is like the classic solo queue game where like G2 is kind of going like one member in at a time, and like somebody's getting picked off, and then they're walking into their base and getting a tower, and then another person gets picked up. Like, oh, okay, we can just chill around and now get in it. And then two more people die. It's like, oh shit, let's start hitting the Nexus towers. And then okay, two people more died. The game is over. At that, it felt like one of those solo queue games where like people just started walking in one by one because you're in that sort of a desperate scenario where you're like
desperate,
yeah, like it's just and T1's just like okay, thank you. We will continue to keep pushing and end this game now.
yeah. No, you're exactly right. When you're desperate, things look a lot worse. The other thing, back on that Faker, like the flash juke play or whatever, I'm glad that on broadcast they brought it up. Like, look, guys, this makes Caps look really silly, but you need to understand what his vision looks like when they do it, and obviously they showed that as well. How like you don't really know. He could flash in 3 different directions, right? He could flash over the wall, which is what Caps thought he did. He could flash into the pit, which is what Caps thought after he didn't find on the other side of the wall. Or he could flash into the brush. And it's like, by the time you've checked all of the options, Caps is just like, I know what the comms are. He's just like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, that's all you could say, right? Because you don't know. Like, there's no way of knowing. You don't have any more wards or whatever.
Yeah.
Because let's say he doesn't flash into the pixel brush in River there, and you turn around to go that way, people will be like, Caps, why didn't you chase him down towards red? You know what I mean?
Yeah, or even if like Faker fails to flash, like then Faker looks like an idiot.
Yeah. It's actually just hope that you guess right as to which direction he goes, and if you guess wrong, you're gonna look dumb, and that's kind of what happened. Even though he wasn't dumb, he just looked dumb. But yeah, T1 kind of toyed with them, and then that was the series. That was the quickest one, right? That was like the 22-minute game.
That was 21 minutes.
21 minutes.
Yeah.
And so obviously that series.
It to me, when we talk about like the fastest series ever, it seemed like almost a mirror image of the G2 versus TL game 3 when that game ended in like 18 minutes in the same exact fashion where the last 5 or 6 minutes was just a G2 member dying almost over and over, similar to how that happened with TL.
I knew this series wasn't the quickest ever. I knew that because, well, first of all, everyone would be saying it, and second of all, I knew the games weren't short enough, but I wasn't sure how close it was. That's why I was asking earlier. I wasn't sure. I thought this would have been number 2, though.
No, I remember reading that it was 3. I'm very confident that it was 3. And the previous one was EDG versus Detonation Focus Me play-ins 2018.
Or was it at MSI or was it at
Worlds? It was at Worlds.
Okay. All right, play-ins, duh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the finals happen.
Yep, a bit of a banger.
5 games. Yeah, 5 games. Where are we starting with this one?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I find weird is I know a lot of people people pretty much nowadays in League will always refer to a series as good or bad when it comes to the number of games is being played. Everyone says like, oh man, that series sucked because it was a 3-0, and oh man, that series was so good because it was a 3-2, but in a lot of these games, like it was either a stomp one direction or another. The only game that was like fairly close was what, game 3, I think.
I felt the same way. I enjoyed the 5 games, and I enjoyed the series. It was a good series, but for 5 games at a finals, I did think it would be a little bit better. I actually kind of agree with you on that.
Yeah, it was a good series.
That
Don't
makes it
get me.
sound like a bad series, though.
No,
Yeah,
no,
it
it,
it,
it
it
was a
was
good
good.
series. Don't get me wrong, but it
Yeah.
just for a 5-game international final, it wasn't one of those like epic 5-game series. Like the what epic 5-game series that I think about. The first one that sticks out in my mind is T1 or is SKT versus Samsung in season 6. Like that is like what you want out of a 5-game series at an international tournament final, and like not every series is going to be that. And I still thought the series was pretty good, but just in terms of like you go back and break this thing down game by game, game one was kind of a stomp. Game 2 was a stomp after the Baron play. Game 5
Game
was
one
a
wasn't
stomp.
that much of a stomp. The only reason why it kind of felt like a stomp was because they were playing the Caitlyn, where like you kind of want to snowball that, right? You want to continuously shove in and take plates, and that's kind of how you snowball. And if you don't really, then you're kind of. And the other problem with that was they ran the same strat where they had the Galio Predator in and kill Caitlyn early, so Tristana got a kill right off the hop. And then they ended up getting a gank go Tristana's way, where she got another kill. So it's like, even though the Caitlyn was able to shove in the bot lane, and it was Caitlyn Morg, right?
Yeah.
Pretty sure it was
Well, the
Caitlyn
thing
Morg.
that was weird was I saw a lot of people talking about that play, saying like, "Why doesn't Gumayusi flash over the wall?" And I actually
Mm-mm.
think that you should just tank the death there
I
and
don't think he
save your
was able to
flash.
get there. I don't think he was able to get there in time. I think he maybe would have, but like Galio with Predator is on your ass like
No,
instantly.
no, I was
I don't
thinking like
know.
he flashes over the blue wall, but I don't know. Like we always, whenever you see these very lane dominant, styles like play styles and champions, a lot of it really hinges on like the flash utilization to either be able to flash and make an aggressive play to push, your lane, very hard in your favor, or when you're pushing your lane really hard, use it as that escape tool to dodge ganks. So I thought, because I just saw a lot of people flaming Gumayusi for not flashing level 1, and in my opinion, like you should just tank the death, save your flash, and then continue to play a very aggressive lane, which they did because, Tristana got the kill early, but Caitlyn was up like 30 CS at, 8 minutes or something like that.
I didn't think he was able to get to the wall and flash.
He,
Maybe he
def-
was.
he
I know
definitely
he
could have
died
flashed.
at. I
He
know
could
he
have
died
flashed.
at the wall. Oh, could he have?
Yeah,
Okay.
before he got predated, he could have flashed, but I mean, who knows? Maybe RNG like flash follows and he's still fucked. But
Yeah.
I think he just tanked the death there.
But regardless, though, the Tristana getting the 2 kills kind of gives away the lead that you want to get when you're running the Caitlyn Morgana bot lane. So
Yeah,
that's kind of a problem. Like, you want to snowball on them and really put them in a tough spot, but they weren't really able to do that. And so that made that, like, it kind of put T1's game plan out the window. They kept losing drags, I believe, as well. I think they were down 3-0 in drags. Um,
yeah. It
am
was
I
really
confusing
weird.
that game with another one? I
No,
think
no,
that
no,
was
no.
that game.
That was this game because like you
And
kind
that's
of.
usually not how it's supposed to go when you have the Caitlyn Morgana. You have Prio bot lane, which should lead to a lot of dragons.
Yeah, this is
But
definitely
it didn't.
like this is a game plan from T1 where you want to dominate through bot lane and then you want to 100% do the soul stacking. And it kind of happened where, even though T1's bot lane had a really big advantage, I think it was around 8 minutes or something, their bot lane gets killed 2v2, and then that leads to like good base timings for RNG. They use their tempo to get dragon, and then the top lane play happens where T1 reads the play with a good lane ward. I don't know who placed the ward, but you know the play I'm talking about, where they're in
Yeah,
top
I
side and
do.
they see them walking to the brush, and T1's like waiting around, and they bait the Nautilus Assault in, and T1's like, it's looking really good for them because they're about to take this 5v4 fight with Gala split, like down in the bot lane, not doing shit. Well, he did
It
eventually
was
get,
only a 2-for-2 by the end,
yeah,
right?
exactly. It was a 2-for-2 and a 1v0 on bot lane with Gala taking 2 waves in a plate. So it was like net positive for RNG. And after that, it just pretty much resulted in another good base for RNG. They have the tempo advantage. They just take the drag for free. And all of a sudden, you're playing this heavy early game comp, only up 1k in gold, and you're down 2 dragons. And when you're playing champions like Jace, Caitlyn, you want to, probably at least have 2 to 3,000 gold advantage. And you definitely want to be that team who has the 2 drags, because part of it is you need to use that gold advantage to force the other team to come fight you at these objectives. Then RNG they didn't care about fighting objectives. Like, they literally just started farming champions in the side lane, and you kind of just saw Bin get super out of control that game on the Gwen. Like
Yeah, and
the main. No, you can go ahead.
I just want to highlight, because now that we pointed out just a couple of the mistakes, even just in game one, I want to bring up the point. Like, there's a lot of discussion about the T1 coach complaining about blue side, and I know a lot. This is just dogpiling on the idea, but I really do hate that excuse when we can easily point to even just in one game already some mistakes that really cost you. You mentioned how they know that RNG is hiding in the brush. They know exactly how this fight should go, and it's still only a 2-for-2. We mentioned the Tristana getting the kills. Like there's obvious places that you can point to T1 making mistakes, and that's what you should be focused on rather than oh we coin flipped and lost blue side advantage. Like there's so many more things. Even like the one dragon setup. Guma puts down his Caitlyn traps, but he places too many traps that like his original one that he puts in the line expired because he put too many traps down, which allows the Tristana and the Nautilus to walk right through, and they end up getting collapsed on from all sides. And I'm like, that's another mistake. Like, there's so many different mistakes that are gameplay related that you can point to in this series that T1 should have done better. And that's the stuff that to me, that's why you need to look at and say, look, we did this wrong, we did that wrong, we did this wrong, we did that wrong. And that's why we lost. Not because you've coin flipped and lost blue side. Like, give me a break, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody recognizes that blue side is definitely, the favored side. I remember when it was our episode we did right after the LCS playoffs finished. I remember bringing up a stat talking about how favored blue side was for the majority of the LCS playoffs. And, but like you were kind of saying, it's not the end all be all. Like, it's not like if you're not on blue side, you're going to lose the game. Blue side is definitely the more advantaged side, but like you said, it's not like they were playing perfectly to begin with, because there were a lot of mistakes specifically in that game one that was happening with this heavy early game draft. And, in my eyes, like that game had nothing to do with the side selection. It was all about the execution of your game plan.
Yeah, and there's three mistakes that I had just laid out there, and that's the ones that I caught. Like there's other ones, I'm sure there's other mistakes that they made as well. And of course the side selection matters. I don't want to make it sound like it doesn't. It's just so secondary to when you're making so many other mistakes that someone could point out. That's where it really really bothers me. And I think I imagine that that's probably the community sentiment around it as well. I know that they're getting a lot of shit for the blue side stuff, but I haven't really clicked on any of the Reddit links to see what any of the comments are or anything like that. But that's what I see when I see like all these mistakes being made. Like, dude, don't complain about blue side. Your team made a lot of mistakes. Own it.
Yeah. And then game 2, the Faker Lissandra play. Faker made
That was huge.
Faker made every single person watching that broadcast come simultaneously. Cause,
okay, relax,
dude. That was like sick. The flash
was nuts. It was a
the
really
flash
nice
W, the flash W into 4 people and just ult yourself so you don't take damage. You deal damage. The Jinx R follows on top with the Wukong ult diving in with the Gangplank ult also coming. Like, oh my god, it was just so disgusting.
The nice thing about it was that a lot of Lissandra's, I guess solo queue Lissandras, I suppose, is what they'll do is they'll wait for the whole claw, right, to the whole Lissandra E to go off so that they get the max distance. He just makes it so that he can get over the wall and then flashes, rather than waiting for the whole animation to go off so that you get more distance with Lissandra E. If you like short it, you're requiring the other team to be the other team has to be really quick to react to that. And so he makes it so that there's no margin for error. Yes, he has to blow his flash to do that, but the reward for it is so huge. He locked down so many of them and they wombo combo with the Jinx ulti, which cleans up the fight and ends up getting them much more back in the game where they were about to lose a Baron, right? So that was a massive, massive play. And those are the plays that people will point to when you're talking about GOAT status and clutch plays. Mind you, they didn't end up winning the series, but if they did win the series, people are going to point to that play all day long. And I think regardless of whether they win the series or not, people should remember that play. That was pretty clean. Because you're in a 3v5 situation. You're about to throw the game, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, it wasn't a situation to where if RNG gets that Baron, the game is over, but it compromises the lead you already had at that point. It probably makes the game a little bit more difficult considering the enemy team is like Xayah Viego, which is pretty insane scaling. I mean, T1 was scaling pretty well themselves, but it's just like you said, it's one of those plays that people will reference when you talk about a player in very high regards in terms of their clutch factor and what they as an individual can just pull out of the bag and just
careers are made at Baron, man. They're made in the Baron pit.
True.
And that's just, I mean, those plays you just tack on to your resume more and more when you have plays like that. Also, Zayas kind of had a pop-off game too. His GP was kind of insane. We mentioned how Bin had a really good weekend. Not in that particular game.
Yeah.
Zayas was the GP. He was playing against Nar, and he was kind of landing barrel after barrel after
Oh
barrel, and that
yeah,
was
his 1v2 in top lane in that game,
it was
absolutely
really funny.
disgusting.
Yeah, it was also really funny the one play where he ulties and Bin can't run away because if he
Yeah,
runs,
under
he
the
has to run
tower.
into. Yeah, that's funny. That's like, oh man, he's sitting on 1 HP. He has nowhere to run. That was quite the funny play. The only other things that I could think of, and I'm sure there are others that maybe you'll remind me from game 3 and 4, but for me, the standouts were actually in game 5. Uh, I guess honestly, maybe it's not even just game 5, but I want to talk about Carrier and just he was not the best player in the world in this tournament, and especially in this series. Honestly, he got caught quite a bit. And then to start game 5, where like this is the game that matters the most, and he's on the Yumi and he gets caught out by a Rakan W, and I'm like, dude,
Yeah, that
come
was
on,
a little bit
man.
tragic.
He actually got caught quite a bit in this series, which
Yeah, game 3 especially.
like I did not think that Carrier had that great of a tournament, considering that he's supposed to be the world's best player. Now, I'm not saying that what everyone was saying is false. I didn't really watch much of Spring Split for the LCK, but definitely underperforming to expectation, right? Definitely
Yeah.
not what
I mean, the
what you
expectations
were
were set
expected to
very,
get.
very high. I wouldn't say he
Yeah,
was like terrible by any means, but he definitely wasn't this like dominant force that people were expecting. I think we saw a little bit of that in some of the Rumble stage, and we did see definitely that against the G2 in the G2 series. But I've said this many, many times before, I think dating mostly all the way back until like season 10, season 11, when talking about Ming, is he's pretty much been consistently, one of the best supports in the world for the last 5 years now. And if it wasn't for Carrier, I would argue that Ming's the best support in the world. I'll still roll with Carrier. But Gala and Ming, especially against T1 in the series, were like destroying them for the most part.
yeah,
Except for
no, you're
except for game 2, I think, you really
yeah.
saw Gala and Ming get the better of them for the most part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The other guy I want to point out is Wei. I mentioned last week how I thought his Lee Sin was disgusting, and that was kind of the same thing. It continued to be really, really huge, especially I think it was game 5 was the game that he played Lee Sin. He might have played
Yeah.
more than one Lee Sin game. I don't really remember. Game 5 was the standout one for me, though.
Their dive
Yeah,
on the mid lane dive that they did at like 6 minutes was like as perfect as a mid lane dive that you can have, in
yeah,
my opinion.
I was really impressed with Wei this tournament. I thought he had a great tournament, and his Lee Sin is the one that I think is his biggest weapon. Although he does have a few, I would imagine.
J4. This J4's beast.
But he doesn't take stopwatch, JNT.
Hey, I mean, he's just smurfing anyway, so fuck it.
Yeah, yeah.
But he needs
The
to take
other
stopwatch.
last thing for me to point out was game 5 when obviously things matter a lot. Xiaohu just got the better of Faker. They lived in the mid lane and they killed him a lot. Uh, you have to. I feel like there wasn't enough discussion about it. Xiaohu just gapped Faker in that game, and yes, obviously the junglers were involved and whatnot. But I feel like there's always this. Well, you know how it is. How people like are they just don't really want to criticize their favorite players. I mean, I could go. I went on about it all last year when Caps was playing in North America. How like if Caps made mistakes, it was never his fault. I think this was a game where Faker just got outplayed, and you have to own it. Like Faker, don't get me
You
wrong,
said
he had a
caps, but
great tournament.
you meant perks, right?
Oh yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
perks, yes.
just making sure.
Um, yeah, Faker had a great tournament, but he got outplayed in this game, and this is a game that matters. And honestly, this is like a he could have really solidified. I mean, he already has GOAT status solidified, but he could have further solidified it by outplaying Xiaohu in this game, but he didn't. And so you got to give credit to Xiaohu for being clutch and showing up in the biggest game of the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from Xiao, but I wouldn't say that it was just him shitting on Faker 1v1. But as I was talking about
No,
Xiao previously.
I mentioned the junglers were definitely
Oh yeah,
involved,
yeah.
but setting up the thing is it always comes down to who can set up the
No,
lane for
exactly,
these.
and exactly that's what I was going to say. Like that kind of
Yeah.
goes hand in hand with Xiaohu's brilliance, which I was talking about in reference to the EG series, because that dive that they pulled off in mid lane, where like Xiaohu was early, like that wave he had shoved it in was earlier on the level 6. Ari didn't have it. He pushes the wave, backs up just out of fog before re-aggressing as Faker starts hitting the wave, and it was I don't know if he flashed or if it was just EW into R into the Lee Sin came over the wall, and it was just like from there, I think Faker at that point was 0-3 or 0-2, and you could kind of see like RNG had started to take over the game because that was after already the solo kill on bot lane, and it was just so good. And they had killed
Earlier
him
in the
previously at
show,
like level 3 or something, so they like RNG at that point I think was up 4-1, and it was like looking pretty rough for T1. And last thing I'll say about this series from like a gameplay standpoint was I wouldn't say for whatever reason, but it seemed like a lot of people had a lot of things to say about Zeus and Bin, sort of talking about with reference to like what Zeus was doing versus the Gwen, and T1 in fact leaving up the Gwen. And
mhm.
for whatever reason, I guess in my opinion, it just feels a little bit like exacerbated. Whereas like we kind of already mentioned this before, but it wasn't like the rest of T1 was playing super, super well and Zeus was just kind of trolling out of his mind and he didn't have like a good top matchup. Like we said it before, like Keria wasn't playing well. Gumayushi he wasn't playing insane. He had a really, really good game too, but was pretty average for the rest of the series. And Gala and Ming were clearly the better bot lane, and Jiahu was clearly the better mid laner, and Wei was clearly the better jungler. So
Yeah.
for a lot of people to just kind of throw the blame on Zeus because he's picking this like Jace and the Gwen matchup, and he's supposed to be shitting on lane, and sure he's up 20 CS, but like Gwen's like scaling on him. I just don't see why everyone is so like concerned with flaming Zeus for this whole Jace versus Gwen thing when it was pretty clear that RNG were just better individually, almost all
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Actually, I would say everywhere, all around.
Yeah.
I couldn't point to a lane where I can't point to one lane where I thought the T1 player was better. I think I'd give it to RNG in every role, honestly. Um, I do want to bring back at the start of the show we mentioned something along the lines of like Xiaohu being amongst the greats, and I wanted to ask you if you had an idea where you would place him amongst like the top players in the world.
I don't know.
If you had a number. I know that's difficult to do to put you on the spot like that.
Maybe like top 10-ish, probably on the
Yeah.
upper side of 10, maybe in like the 7 to 9ish range cuz I
So
mean,
if
you
if
definitely
I were
have. Okay. Well, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to ask if you were to keep him out of top five, who would be in the top five then,
Okay.
rather than go through a list
So
of 10?
probably Faker, Showmaker,
Yep.
uh
Doinby.
Canyon.
What
Yeah.
about Doinby?
Probably Doinby. Canyon, I think.
Yep.
Um I think you need to throw.
Would you put Uzi there? See, this is where I would
I
actually go Xiaohu. Is I would actually have Xiaohu
I
five.
think I
Uh,
would still pick Uzi over Xiaohu.
mm,
I would say that based on the trajectory, Xiaohu will probably pass Uzi, regardless of whether or not he wins Worlds, because obviously the biggest knock on Uzi is that he never won Worlds. But to credit Uzi, he still had very successful seasons 3 and 4 before Xiaohu joined a team in season 5. He either joined summer of season 5 or right at the end of season 5. So I think I still give a little bit more credit to Uzi because going to like World Finals in season 3 and semifinals where they lost to Samsung White in season 4. I think it was 3-2. So I'm gonna give the slight edge to Uzi. So I mean, like I'd have to think a little bit more.
so that would be your top five. Yeah,
Maybe I'd
it's
throw
difficult to do on the
Score.
spot.
Maybe Score could go in there, but I
Mm,
mean, he doesn't really have like the international accolades to back it up like some of these other players do.
yeah.
Yeah. So probably
Nuggery.
at the very least, Faker, Showmaker, Canyon, Doinby, Uzi. It's
It
probably the
really is
five.
difficult.
So
It is
that's
difficult.
I wouldn't put Yahoo above any of those five. I think you could start making
Mm,
the argument for him at 6, but I'd have to really go back and look at a lot of players.
yeah. It is something to do, especially when I just kind of put you on the spot like that. But it is interesting because when you do win multiple international tournaments, especially doing it in different roles, and I will remind people that he did look like a beast in the top lane last year. I do think you need to start considering as to where this guy falls on the GOAT status discussion. And if he does end up picking up a world championship, I think that will skyrocket his stock, if you will. But we're obviously way, way ahead of ourselves with that, right?
I just googled League of Legends Hall of Fame just to see if there was like any just like a list of players or if like somebody was doing some like their
Mhm.
own thoughts on it. One person we definitely got to put up there that I had forgotten is Mata. That guy's definitely got to
Mm,
be up there. I'd put him up
gotcha.
there before Zhao, who I think for sure.
Okay.
That was the main one that
Anyways,
or that's the main one that I read and was like, oh shit, yeah, that guy is definitely in probably the top 5.
anything else on this specific series? Anything else?
Faker's still the GOAT. He's gonna win Worlds.
Okay, I want to ask you now, who's the tournament MVP?
I'd probably give it to Gala still.
Interesting.
I
I actually went
know.
with Xiaohu.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think a lot of people would lean towards Xiaohu or Wei, and I would say that that is totally fine. But to me, Gala clearly looked like the best player in his position, like all the time, no matter what. Wasn't close, and was
Yeah.
pretty much smurfing almost the entire tournament. They literally RNG only lost one game. They lost two games in the Rumble stage, and yeah, Gala's a
Yeah,
beast.
it is interesting because you can actually look to pretty much every member of RNG as being
I guess they lost
absolutely
two
beast
games against T1.
at one point or another. The only guy that you would kind of leave out is maybe Bin because he had a worse start to the tournament. But I mean, we also did mention how he actually really became a weapon this past weekend, styled on in both of the series that he played. So there's that. But yeah, I could see it being a few different options. Moving on a little bit. Okay, so MSI goes pretty well considering that you have to keep China, the Chinese team in China. But the worry that I have is we're going to be approaching Worlds soon. Um, is there any issue, or do you have any worry, JNT, as we want to attend Worlds? Is there any worry that if what happens if China cannot attend Worlds this year?
Yeah,
What
I
if
mean,
lockdowns continue? Any thoughts on that kind of idea?
I think just based on the evidence that we have so far with Riot constantly pandering to the Chinese audience, I've said this before, not to their fault because China's the moneymaker. If we reach a point where in the summer split, lockdown restrictions are still going on and, the Chinese teams can't travel in or out of the country, it's probably there's probably a really good chance that we're going to be doing the same setup for Worlds that we did MSI, where the Chinese teams will unfortunately probably have to stay in China, and if it's if we're at that kind of a situation, that probably means that all the other teams can't fly into China.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that they're going to do a similar setup where they play in Korea and they play on artificial ping again, unfortunately, and that would definitely be, I think, in my opinion, worst case scenario because that's not what you want for Worlds. I think for MSI it's like a little bit acceptable, but Worlds is like, come on, like that is like best of the best, like no excuses, like it's just who is the better team. There cannot be any outside variables affecting this.
Yeah,
So
and to be clear, we have not heard anything that suggests that China will still be in lockdown for much longer. We have no fucking idea.
yeah,
It's just the fact that we have no idea is what worries me, because I want to go to Worlds.
yeah.
um, and that's kind of like the thing is you mentioned how like that's the moneymaker, and that is fair, but it does go beyond money. For the same reasons that they mentioned with this tournament that just happened, MSI is not the same without China being there, and proof. I mean, they just won the tournament, so it goes to show that yeah, they kind of are the best team in the world right now, at least. Um, so I don't know. I don't know what the hell you can do about that, but it does have me worried. The only thing that I could point to that's like good on our side is that like there was a lot of what's the word, criticism for the event that just took place in Korea. Now maybe there was a bunch of restrictions in Korea still as to why they couldn't make the tournament that great, but we know there's not really that many restrictions here in North America. So like if they want to host like a really beast tournament, NA is the place where you don't really have the restrictions to do that, and so that's maybe something we got going for us.
Were they in a different location for the knockout stage? Because
I don't know.
whenever
The
they
stage was
panned to
different.
the stage was different, and whenever they panned to the crowd, it seemed like they were actually like slanted and like like not bleachers, but like a stadium type thing. So
Really? I thought it was the same.
I
I
thought
thought it looked the same.
I have no clue because I was only watching the games. I wasn't watching anything like with the broadcast or in between shots. So whenever they panned to the crowd in the knockout stage, it kind of looked like they were on they were sitting in a slanted form. Like you know what I mean by that when it's slanted, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you would be slanted like that if you're in a stadium or an arena or something like that. I don't know, but it seemed
I
like
thought
it
it was the
was.
same, but I can't say I was like locked in looking at it. But I thought it was the same. Regardless, I do know that the Busan Library memes continued. That definitely happened because it was still pretty quiet during the finals. I mean, T1 would get some team fight wins, and you could hear the crowd, but it was still pretty tame, if you will, in comparison to what you would expect. Like if you have T1 on stage and they're like winning a team fight versus RNG, I'm expecting the crowd to go ape shit, and maybe they were, but we couldn't really tell. There's been a little bit of discussion about how loud was the crowd, or was there just like the sound settings for the broadcast, was it a little bit off, and we don't really know. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure. But the thing is, it did sound like the event wasn't all that great from the outside looking in, and maybe that's COVID restrictions. I have no idea. It's pure speculation, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think that if it's hosted in North America, I don't think there's going to be any Busan library memes or anything like that. But I mean, who knows? Maybe getting too far ahead of myself.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect there to be a ton of problems when it
Yeah.
came to Worlds, especially with the quality of the broadcast, because I can't really even point out an instance where anybody was like, wow, this Worlds broadcast sucks. Because it's
And
always very, very good.
and if anyone listening has any reasons as to why we don't need to worry about this, please let us know. I would love to have my mind put at ease. I'm just kind of worried because I
Drop us
haven't
that
heard
inside
anything.
info.
Haven't heard about the tickets going on sale yet, and it's like, we're still doing this,
I would
right?
imagine once again that the tickets are probably going to be released as late as possible.
Yeah, that's why I'm worried.
Oh well, I mean that's just inevitable, I think,
Yeah. Like you got to
because
get those things on
riots.
sale.
Because dude, we talked about this before. Like, people don't want like a Dota scenario to happen where
Yeah.
they sell events to the ticket. They say, hey, event's gonna be here, buy your tickets, and then they cancel the thing like 5 days out. Like,
Oof.
I would like, I don't know. I'm a
They didn't
consumer.
cancel the event. They canceled
They
people
canceled,
being in
yeah.
attendance, right? So
That's
people traveled from all over the
yeah,
place, got there, and was
yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, you're not allowed into the venue now." And they're
Yeah,
like, "I just
I
did a
meant the
booking
event, like
here."
the physical like event,
Yeah.
not the tournament. But yeah, you get my point.
Yeah, yeah, what a mess that was. All right, let's move on to quick news. We have some TSM stuff, some updates to get into. A couple of investigations going on with TSM. That's nothing new. J&T, you want to give us the lowdown on some of the updates, if you will?
Yeah, so I don't even remember if it was like on TSM's actual Twitter account or if it was on Reggie's Twitter account.
It was
Where
Reggie's.
yeah, actually, like hilarious that they decided to they decided to release the internal investigation that I'll listen to me right now. This was the one that TSM themselves did. It came out on Reggie's Twit longer. Basically, a bunch of bullshit, just saying, "Oh, yep, we did nothing wrong." And I feel like a lot of people like there was a pretty bad reaction to it right away because it's like, what do you mean all this shit's going on? How is there nothing wrong? But like, guys, you got to remember, like, this is TSM's own investigation. Obviously, they said that Reggie is not going to be involved, and who knows, maybe that was the case, maybe that wasn't the case. But did people actually think that TSM's own personal investigation into their owner's actions was that going to yield anything? Probably not. So to
Yeah.
me, I couldn't really care with this TSM internal investigation. They obviously, from their side, have said that nothing, no wrong was done. But what I will say to that was they did use very specific language when they said, like, we had not broken any laws and have been following, like, everything, like, from a
Yeah, I
legal
have it here.
standpoint. They didn't really touch on the abuse per se. It seemed to be more touching on like the Washington Post article stuff they were talking about with like the contractor versus employee type things. So there's just not really like a lot that you can take away from this to say like this is a credible source and oh, this is actually like a solution to the problem or this answers our questions, because it doesn't really answer shit.
Well, and we mentioned the last time we talked about this a few weeks ago or whatever. I remember saying like, I don't believe in. You can only believe in coincidences to a certain extent, because like I don't believe that there's a world where Reggie's just being a nice guy and then you have all these players and people saying like no, he's actually an asshole, and people leaving the organization en masse. Like I just don't see a world where that's happening all at the same time, where so many people are leaving and so many people are saying yeah, like he kind of treats people like he's kind of a bully. And yes, I know most of it came from Doublelift, but Doublelift was not the only one to say that, right? There have been other coaches that have said like TSM coaching on TSM was the worst experience I ever had. Parth leaves TSM in like January, like the season like barely started, and Parth is like, I'm out. Like it just feels like there is things happening, even without evidence, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to be clear that I don't have evidence to say. It just feels like, can I really believe in all these coincidences?
Where
And
there's
I don't,
smoke, there's
I don't think I
fire.
can. Yeah, yeah.
Is that the saying?
Yeah, that is
Okay.
that's one saying. Yep. And so, I mean, that's where we're at. And honestly, people immediately jumped on to meme all over this twit longer. And you mentioned how it's him tweeting it out himself, which is hilarious.
Like, dude, where is TSM's P? Like, do they exist? Do they exist?
No,
I want to
they
know
must
because
not.
we continue to talk about how horrible TSM's PR team is in terms of when they release statements, how they release statements, what's being said in these statements, the timing of it. Like, the list continues to go on. And then once again, for this investigation that's being done, that's being, your company's being looked into by your own company for the reasons of your owner being a shitty owner, then your owner is the one releasing the results of this investigation when, you know, I presume that they were probably doing everything correctly. I hope, for TSM's sake, I hope that they followed the investigation properly and correctly and this wasn't a bunch of bullshit. But just to tweet it out from like Reggie's personal account is just so fucking stupid. Like, God, it's just dumb. Like I
I mean,
actually,
I'm not even surprised though.
if they are paying people on like their PR team, like I want to know these people. I want to know where they are. I need to know their names because like this is not real.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's really surprised by this at this point. Like, it's hard for TSM to surprise people at this point. We've seen so much come out of TSM that it's like, okay, what surprises anyone anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And then Peter Zhang stuff. There was a second article from Richard Lewis from Dexerto.
How the hell do you say that website's name? Can I get like a?
It's Dexerto, or I always hear you say Dextero. It's not. It's not Dextero.
It's like Dexterto, or is that like?
No.
How is it? Say it again.
Dexerto. Let me open up the thing.
Dexerto.
Dexerto, I believe.
Dude, it's
Dextero or something like that.
Sounds like Spanish or something. I don't know. Like.
Yeah, it might be.
Yo, make up a simpler name, man. Like, come on.
Anyways, I believe it's Dexerto. If I'm saying it wrong, someone can let me know of that as well. Yeah, basically saying that the first article about all the Peter Zhang stuff came out was like, now they have more evidence. Basically, I could read out just some small parts here. It says, it was the conclusion of the law firm that Zhang was not acting in the best interest of the organization. The report stating that we observed evidence indicating other irregularities in connection with Mr. Zhang's role in recruiting players from China. In particular, certain recommendations Mr. Zhang made to TSM may have been motivated by personal gain, including in connection with the salary diversion scheme discussed, rather than recruiting the best players for the team. So if people don't really remember what went on here, there was kind of word that Peter Zhang was pocketing some money for getting some players on TSM, was like the allegations. And it seems like that stuff has come to fruition. There was also, I guess, 17 bank accounts, 17, where some of the money was being filtered into from TSM to these bank accounts. And later on in the
that just sounds sketchy.
Like, it doesn't sound normal at all. How does that? The thing is, in the rest of the article, it goes on to say that like it's believed that it's possible Zhang could have been getting the money from these 17 accounts later. And I was like, oh my god, man. The gist of it is pretty much that, like, yeah, if there was any benefit of the doubt before, it's kind of seeming like that's out the window. That's what I was getting from the article. I would highly recommend people find the article and read it themselves, but it's still really, really bad.
Yeah. In summary, yes, I'm stupid once again.
Well, and the other thing too is I should also read this smaller part as well, where it says, investigators also state that they have found suspicions that Zhang leaked information from TSM to Han Yu in order to facilitate his business. Mr. Zhang may have provided Han Yi with non-public information regarding TSM's recruiting decisions in order to benefit Han Yi and or himself, they stated. So, like, I'm making up a hypothetical thing here. I don't know if this is what happened or not, but maybe he went to the talent agency and said, oh, TSM really wants a support that is looking for X, Y, and Z, and obviously the talent agency could kind of, push those things that TSM is looking for,
Yeah.
If people know exactly what TSM is looking for, it gives the advantage to the agent or the talent agency to kind of highlight those things for TSM, and then obviously Peter Zhang could be like, hey, TSM, since I'm a part of you, I think we should go for this player, and then kind of take a pay cut from some of the money. It's just a whole whack of Just read the article. It's a mess. It's a semi-long article, but worth the read. It is crazy that this stuff can actually happen, especially on like the most well-known org for North American League of Legends. It's so insane to see where this org has landed or what it's become.
Yeah. Yeah. So next up, um, a league personality who we haven't heard from for a little while, Mr. Rush, former C9 jungler, tip jungler, turn streamer, pretty entertaining guy.
Yeah, he's a funny guy.
He finished his mandatory Korean military service. He tweeted that out. He didn't specifically say whether or not he was looking to join a team, but before joining, he previously was on KT Rolster and did actually start for them in the back half of one of the LCK splits, although KT Rolster hasn't been doing the greatest lately. So it'll be interesting to see if he tries to come back and play competitive, or he, maybe goes back to streaming. One funny thing that came out of his tweet, though, is that he said he lost his ability at playing League and that he's currently Gold 2. So.
Yeah, that's hilarious. There's no way he's actually Gold 2.
Like, I mean, maybe he's Gold 2 right now, but
right. Yeah, like I'm not saying his account isn't Gold 2, but there's no way as a player he's actually Gold 2. Like I promise you, he could play for a week and get past Gold 2.
Yeah, I just want to read out the tweet because it's funny.
Yeah, go for it.
He says, "I've just finished mandatory military service. I've changed a lot. Things I got from military: toxicity, fat, $8,000. Things I lost: humanity and my league skills."
Oh.
He says, "Also, I lost the ability to speak English, so all these tweets are help from Google. Please understand. Thank you." In brackets, Google translated message.
It's funny and sad because like he's like a memer, right? Like you could just tell, like if it's him saying it out loud, I would laugh. But the thing is, he might be being honest about it.
Oh, like, maybe like
the toxicity. Like, oh, that feels bad. I hope that they didn't take the memer out of him because that's one of the best parts of Rush. He's just a funny guy.
Yeah, if he's not going back pro, like I need to see him on streams again.
Yeah, that would be nice. And then also, LCS EV, I guess, is the one leaking, or not even leaking, but just kind of solidifying what the rosters are supposed to be. The main standout is Big Dokes. Big Dokes is going to be back in the LCS. We kind of anticipated CLG would make a move with their top laner, because name Jenkins didn't really have the greatest split. He was kind of AFK for it, most of it, to be honest. Like, he didn't really make too much happen. And obviously, Dokla was having some success with CLG Academy, so it seems only natural that Dokla is back in the LCS again.
Yeah, I know we did like a pretty long rundown of the teams. Maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. And there were still some other positions that kind of were in question. The ones that I will mention were like a Blaze Olive for mid for Golden Guardians. We didn't know if he was going to be starting, but seems like he is. If you remember what we talked about in that previous video, the only change really is Dokla. Dokla is now starting. Jenkins is in Academy, although there have been a lot of shakeups in the Academy scene. We're not going to go through all of those, but if you're a big Academy fan, I presume that this split will be fairly exciting because there are a lot of good players down there.
Yeah. And you could go check out the tweet and see what all the rosters are. I'm sure that you could find the rosters somewhere online.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
Speaking of Dokla, the Champions Queue winner.
Yep.
Yeah, Champions Queue, they're opening it back up either tomorrow or the day after. With the requested changes from a lot of the players who were playing in Champions Queue, most notably the MMR system, which is working in a similar fashion to how normal ranked goes, where MMR is somewhat tied to your LP, and if you're a good player, you're going to get matched with good players, and if you're a bad player, you're going to get matched with bad players, and I feel like that's what they were asking for, because a lot of the complaints from Champions Queue, especially towards the tail end of it, was, I have 4 LCS pros, or they have 4 LCS pros, I have 1, and I'm that one. We fucking lost. And, for the most part, it pretty much kind of held true. I know I didn't watch a whole lot of Champions Queue in the back half of it, but in the front half, pretty much any single time that you saw any of the really good LCS players on a team, whether it was like 2, 3 of them, that was pretty much the team that was going to win, unless like some random player was like having like a god game. It was just pretty much whoever had the most pros on their team was going to win the game.
I'm very much stuck between hopium and, hopefully this thing gets going again and people get excited about it again now that they changed the MMR system. And I'm also stuck between that and like, oh, here we go again, because there was so many complaints and no one was playing it for a little while and blah, blah, blah. I don't know where I fall. And that's, I guess, why I'm a little bit nervous for it.
I expect Champions Queue to be popular because players are going to want to catch up on the durability patch. I mean, they already have because the patch has been out for like a week and a half now. But when you talk about getting prepared for summer split and there's this huge patch that's gone on in the off season, you presume that the players would want to practice, like against other good players because that'll get like, I mean, people always talk about how even before Champions Queue was added in, a Champions Queue like system makes it so that you can practice in a very high level environment, which gives you more accurate representation and accurate data of the champions you're learning, perfecting, new item builds, new champion, whatever. So I would presume if I was a player like that, I would be wanting to learn the durability patch against good players in Champions Queue. Versus the fucking randomness that is solo queue. So once
hope,
again,
man.
opium. But I mean, there's really not too much to say if Champions Queue just kind of dies out again because that would just pretty much be a huge fuck you.
This could be the last test, honestly. We might not get it back next year if things don't go well again, right? If things go poorly again, that's kind of a tough sell for them to put up, what was it, 400 grand in prize pool for this year?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a lot of money.
Here's the thing that people do need to think about with this is I think when Champions Queue first was announced, everyone thought that this was like the end all be all. Like, okay, well, now all the pros are going to use Champions Queue and that's going to be it. But at the same time, what we kind of saw towards the, when Champions Queue really started to slow down was that was when the LCS season was, kind of coming up on its last third. And multiple pro players, I mean, a lot of them came out and said, like, you're playing solo queue, you're not playing as much solo queue or Champions Queue or whatever towards the end of the split because you start to get very hyper focused on one specific patch, and you focus much more time on your scrim and your scrim time as opposed to solo queue / Champions Queue. And I feel like we're going to be in a similar situation going into summer split where we reach the end of summer. And guess what? Playoffs is going to be happening. Nobody's going to be playing it. Sure, maybe it'll be the streamers and the amateur players, but once he gets that, then it kind of loses its pizzazz when you don't see the players like Bjergsen or Jojo or I don't know, Jensen or whoever, the players that really make Champions Queue, very what's the word? Not flashy, but like gives the lower tier players a reason to play it. Because it has like these pros on that they want to learn a lot from. So unfortunately, I think we're most likely going to get into a similar situation as we did last year, where when the LCS season starts to come to an end, it's going to fall off heavily, and people are probably going to be like, "Oh, well, why aren't people playing it?" And I feel like we just kind of need to drill this expectation in our head that Champions Queue is going to be its most popular and it's going to be at its peak from right before LCS to about week 7 or week 8. And that should be its lifespan, and that should be what Riot is kind of focusing in on and using that as like the target time frame of Champions Queue. Because I feel like when they first released it, it was like, okay, well, this is going to be something that's going to be open all the time and people are free to use it. Whereas I feel like it's now, I wouldn't even call it like it's going to be like a boot camping thing, but like it'll be something that's used for a very specific time periods.
Yeah.
As opposed to this just portal where any high ELO amateur academy LCS player can go to get good practice. It's going to be like, nope, you use it from this date to this date. And when it's, before or after that date, nobody gives a fuck about it.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. The thing is, even though I understand why the pros are picky, they are still very, very picky, and they might just find things to complain about regardless. But only time will tell, and we can only hope that Champions Queue is eventually a success like we thought it might be when it first was announced. That is it for this episode, right, J&T? Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I think that's it. The Celtics, NBA Finals, Buggers. Celtics in 6, Jeez. Don't at me.
And the Rangers, too?
I mean, I hope they beat the Lightning.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's going to be a difficult task.
I don't got any other teams to watch. The only thing I could watch is the Blue Jays, and it's like fucking May. I guess it's
regular
June now.
Season baseball. Fucking shoot me now.
Dude, they're good right now, okay? They're actually kind of popping off.
I heard the Red Sox were like half decent.
Yeah, they're starting to pick it up. You know what? One of the problems
I saw an article. I saw an article, and it was like MLB power rankings, and it was Red Sox up. That's all I saw.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go on too long about this because it's just baseball talk. But like one of the big issues right now with baseball is a lot of the baseballs change from year to year. Like the ball is just not traveling as far, and so guys really need to like fucking crush the ball for it to leave the yard, and so there's less home runs. The runs scored this year are way down,
Is
and it
baseball
varies every
actively
year.
doing that? Or is it just like
No, not on purpose. There's a whole video on it as to like why the baseballs are different. They're not trying to, and there's a long story that I'm not going to get into. But the problem is scoring is way down. So like a sport that's already pretty slow to begin with is actually just becoming much more slower, and Major League Baseball needs to do something about it. Like holy fuck, man. They fucking suck. They almost signed. I remember the LCS almost signed a deal that was like the people that ran Major League Baseball were gonna run the LCS or something like that. This was a few years back. Yeah, this was a few years
like
back.
when franchising was happening?
I think it was around that time. Something fell through, and thank fucking God, because Major League Baseball does not know at all how to cater to a younger audience. Like, not even close. If people listening to this think the LCS is bad at like catering to their audience, you have no fucking idea how bad Major League Baseball is to catering to a younger audience. Like, baseball will die if Major League Baseball doesn't have somebody else take over. The commissioner is fucking lost, man.
I don't even know the commissioner's name. What is his name?
It's Rob Manfred.
Who is that?
Who Megalol? Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't matter.
People know who Gary Bettman is. People know who like.
Yeah.
People know who Roger Goodell is. People know who Adam Silver is.
Yeah. I've gone on enough about baseball for one Clown Fiesta podcast.
We're inserting sports into this. We're going really off the rails here.
Yeah, but summer split's coming soon, so 2 weeks or 3 weeks away. But that means that we're going to be missing an episode next week, guys. So we're skipping one more because there's just really not much happening right now. There is always a chance that Reggie decides to do something else stupid, or TSM for that matter decides to do something else stupid, and maybe there's an episode around that. But barring anything crazy, we're going to be skipping 1 week is the plan, and we're supposed to be back on the 13th. I keep saying maybe next week we do live shows. Maybe next week. I don't fucking know, man.
I think we'll have it back for the start of the season.
At the moment. We hope so. And then LCS starts the weekend of the 18th.
I can say with 60% confidence we'll have the live stream back as of right now.
Okay. I hope
number
so.
will improve.
But for those, and then of course I have to remind you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying the content, and we love you for it. Be sure to drop those comments and the like buttons. That stuff always helps us out, and I think we've rambled on plenty, so thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks for the next episode. This has been episode 87 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Take care, guys.